The observant among you will note that I am scrub today. No hair, no makeup. And that is because on Saturday, when I did this entire intro, I went and looked at the feedback or the footage afterwards, and I cannot be trusted with makeup. So, until Skillshare starts sponsoring us and I learn how to do makeup properly, this is what you're getting. And hello humans! Welcome back to the Elementals Project, where I, a small blob of sentient carbon and aspiring ruler of the world, have painted the entire periodic table as fantasy creatures, and I'm presenting them to you in their groups. So last time we did the alkali metals, and today we're doing the alkali earth metals. They are represented in my table as goblins, and they're really cute, and I'm very excited, and I'm so glad you're here. First up is beryllium. Its uses tend to take advantage of the fact that it is lightweight and rigid, so it shows up in structural components of spacecraft and satellites and bicycle frames. It is also non-magnetic and non-sparking, which makes beryllium tools a must-have for work on oil rigs and bomb disposal squads, and so much more. Honestly, beryllium is pretty badass. It's used in semiconductors, targeting mirrors, radiation windows for X-rays, and on and on. Since it has so many skills and is at home in so many dangerous places, I tried to give him a sort of secret agent swagger here, like, hell yeah, I'm awesome and I know it. And since my nerd ass associates beryllium with Galaxy Quest, I sat him on a beryllium sphere, which, as it turns out, is perfectly valid even for non-nerds, because beryllium spheres actually exist, although they're much smaller than this and more like desk decorations. So the reason alkali earth metals are called that is because before they were isolated as elements, their oxides were known and used and called earths, because they acted like dirt. They are basic. Not basic, but basic. Damn it, English. Why all the homophones? I tried to translate club, like group of like-minded people, into Cinderin the other day, and it gave me grand, and I was like, damn it. And then slang just makes more things into homophones. If words were storage, English's house would have all junk drawers that also contained underwear and pastries. But anyhow, beryllium is used in very expensive golf clubs, so I gave him some, and I went with silvery grey skin for this whole group, just because it feels right for goblins, especially metallic goblins. It took a hot minute to give him a confident expression that wasn't, smarmy, and even now I'm a little on the fence about whether I succeeded. He's got a little bit of a Macaulay Culkin face, though, doesn't he? That's cool. And he's holding an emerald, because emeralds are a form of beryl, and beryl is where beryllium gets its name. If this paint job is moving a little too fast for you, by the way, these first 3 goblins do have their own videos. I used to narrate quite a bit slower, so be warned that that's a thing. I've been told that beryllium in particular is a tad soporific, so I recommend it if you have insomnia. If you do that, please comment. I would love that so much. I thought these little rocket ships would be a nice reminder of beryllium's critical place in spacecraft, and we gotta get those cute little highlights going, and onward we go. Speaking of the individual videos, Magnesium here is where I actually hit my stride, I think. I started talking faster and getting more interesting, I hope. Magnesium is one of quite a few that I saw in my head as soon as I started reading about it. It had to look not evil, but chaotic and unpredictable. In fact, unpredictability is the meaning I assigned him, because magnesium is pyrophoric and has a history of randomly bursting into flames. This is great when its powdered form is being used as a photography flash, and less good when it's a race car. But you gotta make race cars strong and lightweight, and those are words that certainly apply to magnesium. That, and of course, it is an essential vitamin. We need it to survive. Please don't take that to mean you should go around licking race cars. Interestingly, we can absorb magnesium through the skin, which is why Epsom salt baths are so good for us. At least I think they are. Salt baths are my panacea for everything, including radiation burns, and I wish I was kidding. But I'm not suggesting that you go rubbing up against race cars either, although I won't stop you. I was honestly hoping that I could get these out once a week in accordance with the will of the vengeful godlike algorithm, but it's turning out to be not really feasible. If I wasn't momming this mob and homeschooling the youngest and illustrating a book on a tight deadline, and to top it all, either embarrassingly indolent or one of the millions walking around with undiagnosed ADHD, I could probably do it. But all of that is true, so we're looking at once every 2, maybe 3 weeks. I hope that's enough. If you weep from missing me in between videos, go follow me on Instagram and favorite my Etsy shop. Oh, and my website shop is live now too, so I will link that in the description. And while you're there, you can grab yourself the Elementals poster. It turned out so pretty, and I am so proud. Magnesium flares with a bright white light, which I represented with his tail fluff here. As for that hat, I have no idea where it came from, but I really love it. And the mutton chops. I was hoping to achieve a character that isn't defined by his posture. If you saw him just lounging around in a pub or as a plushie, you'd know who he was right away. And I sort of want that hat, although I don't think I could pull off mutton chops. As for nudity, the original Magnesium video has a random nudity anecdote, but I think for a costume I'd do a bodysuit. Seems safer. Calcium here is another whose character design just leaped out of my hindbrain and splattered onto the canvas. Some of these guys were so clear, I had this eerie feeling I could have painted them with my eyes closed. All I needed to do was get out of my own way, get out of their way, and the thing was done. Calcium is a funny one because we all associate it with structural things like chalk cliffs and bones and coral reefs, but by itself it really ain't that. It's just a soft and boring and caustic metal, which only becomes a structural support when it is combined with other elements. Some kind of spiritual lesson in that, I can't help but think. Like, we define our companions as we are defined by them. Something like that. As a matter of fact, I have written sort of spiritual interpretations of almost all the elements at this point, which I post for my patrons on Patreon in preparation for producing the whole shebang as an oracle deck, with hard science on each left-hand page and mysticism on the right, so that anyone can use the deck as either a set of chemistry flashcards or as a mutant tarot. 2 years I've been working to this end so far, and honest to gods, I never thought I would have the chutzpah to keep going. But it's all so fascinating, and it's so fun to be coming up with a way for a mind like mine to remember facts that would otherwise shrivel up in my brain and blow away. I had a good time with the lighting on this little guy, and designing a tower for him to be building out of random objets de calcium. In case it's not all self-evident, we have a bone and some blackboard chalk leaning up against a gallon of milk, with a tooth, a snippet of coral, a lump of limestone, a seashell, and an egg. I managed to get the milk to be a size that makes him look childlike in proportion, but that egg will bother me forever. It's so tiny. What is it, a quail's egg? Those aren't white. I have failed. Am shamed. His huge hands are pretty cool, though. Love the hair. And I didn't film it, but that streaky background gets smoothed out in the final piece. Obviously, the milk needs a more contrasty color palette. All in all, I love him muchly. Good details. Stupid egg. Intermission. While looking for goblin footage, I found this missing rubidium background painting footage. This makes more sense when you know that I did not paint the elements in a super organized fashion. That, in fact, I hung up a block of blank canvases, 3 high and 8 per row, because that's what would fit in the hallway, and would simply work on whichever of those 24 spoke to me on a given day. It is impossible to overstate how well that suited my creative process, but it plays merry hell when trying to collect the whole story of each painting in one place, because it's not like I would turn off the camera when swapping between paintings, and I was generally working on at least 2 at a time. Back to goblins. Here we have Strontium, the first of the goblins without his own video. So pay attention! This is all new. The concept is strontium is popularly associated with nuclear fallout, but it only has one radioactive isotope and is otherwise perfectly stable. So I nicknamed him Confusion and gave him this blindfolded juggling thing he's doing, which might have been a great concept for rubidium. Oh well. Anyway, strontium is a spiky metal, and it also has a yellowish sheen to it, and thus we get the classic hedgehog look. The human body, when it ingests strontium, mistakes it for calcium. Confusion again, see? and stores it in the bones, which is not really a health hazard when the strontium in question is the stable kind. There is no evidence that naturally occurring strontium does any harm when it's brought on board the body. Those who have this happen with the radioactive kind, though, they find themselves in deep trouble. His face bears more than a passing family resemblance to Beryllium, but that's just a happy accident. They may all be goblins and alkali earth metals, and can be considered, therefore, something like siblings, but I was going for unique facial features on each one. There shouldn't be any possibility of confusing them for each other. As physical elements, they have strong senses of identity. I wanted to mimic that. I sort of lose it later. Spoilers. While doing the lanthanides and actinides, because while each one is a different species of frog, I myself have a hard time remembering which one goes where. But, funnily enough, that's perfectly appropriate for those elements, and we'll discuss that when we get there. As a reference to his affinity for bones, he has a necklace of them, as you can see. His only other garment is that tool belt, which was my subtle way of alluding to the fact that strontium does have a number of uses, such as providing a red color to fireworks and being a major ingredient in glow-in-the-dark toys. I like to picture little glowing dinos in those pouches, and perhaps a TV remote to signify that old CRTs needed strontium-doped glass to block X-rays from getting out the front. And yes, the red fireworks are represented by the balls because I get bored by literal interpretations. Except sometimes, because strontium is used to extract sugar from beets and is in toothpaste for sensitive teeth, and I couldn't resist the bizarre incongruity of adding a toothbrush and a beet to his kit. Obviously, at least I hope it's obvious, that glowing ball represents his radioactive isotope. I made it a little extra sinister if you look closely. Or even if you don't. I'm not terribly good at subtle. We have arrived at Barium, which I remember very clearly as the not-too-unpleasant berry-flavored smoothie I needed to drink before every scan during my cancer fight. It had a slightly metallic taste, and like I said, it wasn't awful, except that you had to slam about 24 ounces of it, and that is tedious. But the only time I really hated it was when they needed to check and see if the cancer had spread to my reproductive organs, so I had barium in every orifice, and this suddenly got way too personal. This whole process is due to the fact that barium is opaque to imaging machines, so it's used to map a digestive system. It goes into dark places and shines a light on what it finds there. The character's design was a breeze again, since I already know this goblin so well, and it only occurred to me later that barium is the only alkali earth metal wearing a garment. It's only a cloak, though. It's not too weird. Sure, they're naked under the cloak, to maintain the pattern. When a character design is this simple, I find that I fiddle with the nuances a lot. Little details are more important when there's so few of them, And it wasn't the easiest to give them that little glance over the shoulder at the viewer. Not to mention foreshortened feet. Ever drawn a foot from behind? It is such a pain. They always look wrong. And it took me a hot minute to realize that arm was way too long, but I finally made it. I have a soft spot for this painting. Not just because the element helped save my life, but because the pose is dynamic. It was all too easy to fall into the trap of just posing each element like a doll. So every time I didn't, I gotta feel proud. Barium has other uses. One of its compounds is used to float rock chips out of a mine shaft during drilling, another way for it to go into dark tunnels and be a guide. It also can be added to steel alloys, and its inclusion in fireworks makes them green. The lamp needed to have some charm to it since it's going to draw the eye. And, well, my imagination is pretty great. I didn't want to design the lantern from scratch. Creativity is easier when you have a starting point. I've said it before, and I'll say it always. Use reference images. There is no reason at all to flail around in the dark when resources are so easy to access. His cloak is green in homage to the fireworks, and now we're going to finish that floating disc, which I tried to include in every painting of an element that is used in YBCO superconductors, which are so freaking cool, guys. If you're ever bored, go look at the science of superconductors. It blows the mind. Finally, we have the obligatory glass of the so-called smoothie, and then some footling about, because even when severely cropped, my painting process is pretty haphazard. Now the symbol included in the framework of the lamp, and we're through! And on to radium. Radium was rather elusive, my humans. It took a little more work to get her to look right. At first she was closer to the character design of the girl in the ring, as you can see, but I abandoned that very quickly. First, we needed a perfectly smooth background, which is difficult to pull off with acrylics. If I was working with oils, this would be easier, but I can't afford oils, and anyway, I'm scared of them. Then we lost the long hair. She demanded a Marcel wave instead. This is in reference to the fact that the most notorious use of radium was during the 1920s, when watch companies hired young women to paint the luminous numbers on timepieces by hand with glowing radium paint, as one of history's most blatant "oh shit, we need OSHA" moments. You'll notice I keep adding details, then removing them. What she needs is a look that is stark and bleak, because her assigned meaning is an overarching reference to the ways radium in particular and radiation in general have caused harm to organisms in ways that couldn't be observed or even proved for a while. Denial. And to represent denial, you need someone who isn't overburdened with accessories. She has the skull, and I find a place to display those deadly watch faces, and that's it. At first, her hand just has a single finger over the mouth of the skull, but later, off camera I'm afraid, I move it so that the whole mouth area is covered. Since so much of the historical story of radium is that those who die by her hand have their voices silenced, that's the metaphor we're going for. Not to break the gravitas, but when my youngest got the Nerdy Crafter craft box for his birthday last year, he offered to let me make a figurine too, and I chose radium based mostly on how simple she is. I didn't want to be trying to learn how to use new materials with something overly complex. Look how cute she ended up being. Ermagerd the Menace is somehow subsumed by the cuteness. And of course, I fell in love with the kit, and I've made 4 of these element figurines so far, which we'll look at as and when we get to them. The other thing that didn't happen on camera was her radioactive glow, because I am kind of awkward with the airbrush and definitely don't have the confidence to do it while you're watching me. If you want good airbrushing footage, go watch some of the aforementioned Nerdy Crafter. She rocks it. And that's it for this group. I'm so glad you came along. I hope you learned something. I know I did. And next time might be even quicker, because that group is just going to be scandium and yttrium, for reasons that shall become clear in due time. And I need to take a moment to thank my patrons, who are awesome, and I love you, and here are their names, and you can join them. Links in the description. Leave a message at the beep. Remember that basic isn't necessarily an insult. And until next time, stay healthy.